Hey folks, welcome back to Only Best Fancy Novels. My name is Robin, and today we're talking about Born of an Iron Storm by Anthony Ryan. This is the second book in his Age of Wrath trilogy, which itself is a sequel to his Covenant of Steel trilogy. So if you haven't read the Covenant of Steel, you probably don't want to pick up these books because the first book in this trilogy, the Age of Wrath trilogy, it very much has spoilers for what happens in Covenant of Steel. Just FYI. So this book, Born of an Iron Storm, is a pretty solid entry into the trilogy. It's a middle book and it operates very much like a middle book. I'll get into what I mean by that in a bit. First of all, what is this book even about? So it picks up pretty much where things left off at the end of the first book, and this is the Queens of Fallen. The war has erupted essentially. The invaders have secured the capital of Scarmagnol, and they now have their sights set on a key port city. Elvine finds herself uniquely positioned, we shall say, to enact some critical plans that could turn the tide of war in the favor of the invaded people, the Asgardians, and it's a role that she is going to force her to become something that is not necessarily what she wants to be. Relying on powers that she doesn't necessarily want to be associated with. So that's her. Then in the Outer Isles we have Thera, who begins to gather allies to mount to come back against the Nilfgaardians. But the cost of gathering these allies is a price that she may not be willing to pay. Across the seas, we have Felnir, who has landed in a new territory, shall we say, and begins to carve himself a kingship. But even as he does so, it quickly becomes clear that he is just a pawn in a larger story that's being played out. And then finally, we have Rulin, who he managed to escape captivity, and now he's essentially trying to find a way back home before that way is closed forever. So that's kind of where, like, the general gist of what goes on with these characters in this particular book. And like I said, it's a very solid mid entry in terms of the fact. And when I say mid, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean mid as in just average. It's just okay. It's just solid. It does pretty much exactly what the middle book of a fantasy series does in most cases, which is to just take the stories where they left off in the previous book and progress them in a way where they're positioned towards a finale where things can be a bit more exciting. That being said, there are some things done in this book that really that work pretty nice, so I kind of want to talk about them individually. First and foremost, the storyline I enjoyed by far the most was Elvine's. Like, in her case, she's positioned in the heart of enemy territory. Essentially, she's uniquely placed in a position of trust that allows us to get quite a bit an idea of the of how the enemy side, how the Nilfgaardians, how they function, how they think, essentially, and her story in terms of like the character relationships and that sort of things that she forms with some of the new characters that are present in this book. It was just a bit more entertaining than in any of the other three cases that we dealt with. So, and then there's the developing storyline with some of the choices that she has to make, the conflict internally, and just the way that she she deals with situations. All in all, like, her story was just the most entertaining to read in terms of like the strategic importance of what she does. And then we have the parallels between Thera and Felnir's stories, which was pretty interesting because each story by itself, it really doesn't do anything new, interesting, or unique in terms of fantasy stories. Their particular plot lines in this particular book, at least, are a dime a dozen littered across pretty much any fantasy book you can think of, any genre fantasy book. But I like the way that Anthony Ryan handled them in this one. Like, there's a clear parallelism between what goes on with them. In one hand, we have a case where someone sets out to achieve something, like they actively seek it. Whereas in the other hand, we have someone who is pushed into that role, not necessarily because they want it. On one hand, we have someone who seeks, who they do this without thinking of the consequences of their actions, and in the other, they both and in the other one, they can only think of what is going to cost them if they take this step. And in both cases, they're clearly at the mercy of outside forces. In one case, it's a bit more sinister than the other. But like the parallels between their stories, essentially, it was interesting to me, especially given their animosity and just the bad blood between them in general, as we've seen over the course of these books. And then finally, we have Rulin himself, who he has his story. Honestly, it wasn't that it was just okay to read. It wasn't particularly interesting. It didn't really stand out for me, mainly because of the fact that his story is so reactive. For the most part, he's just on the run. He and his fellow escapees, they're on the run. They're reacting to the situation. They get embroiled in a weird dynamic with the local clan that gives him that kind of sets him down almost like a chosen one kind of storyline, but not quite. And we see the difference when as we progress towards the end of the story. So his story was okay, but it really just did little more than to position him. Like this book did little more than to position him for the finale, which I'm sure Anthony Ryan is going to do. Aside from all of that, as far as the book went, like it read pretty fast. It wasn't bad. That's really all I could say about this. Like it was solid. It was okay. Like it didn't blow my mind. I certainly didn't enjoy it to the extent that I enjoyed the first one. But at the same time, it wasn't a bad book. There's nothing specific I could point to it and say I didn't like this, I didn't like that. It was just okay. It did exactly what it set out to do, which was to progress the story, set the stage for the next book. Yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know about Born of an Iron Storm. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.